What does a relationship look like between a Type 2 helper and a Type 7 enthusiast? Well, let's start off by talking about a few things they have in common. Enneagram 2s and 7s have so much in common that people mistake them for each other all the time. And by people, I'm mostly talking about the amateur Enneagrammers out there on YouTube and social media who make a living slapping personality types on famous or fictional characters. This mistype actually bothered me so much a while ago that I made a departure from my normal educational content to address the serious confusion around a Mr. Ted Lasso's Enneagram type. Now, I'm not going to rehash what I stated in that video, but if you love the show like I did, then it may be worth watching after you finish this episode, and of course, the link is in the description below. Now, there are a few key areas where 2s and 7s have the most in common, starting with the harmonic triad, which explains the general way each Enneagram type copes with painful experiences. 2s and 7s are both in the positive outlook group of the harmonic triad, which means they prefer to remain upbeat, optimistic, and cheerful at all times, and especially in the face of adversity. This is also why 2s and 7s can become fairly avoidant, as they prefer to reframe, downplay, or just totally ignore anything that disturbs their positive outlook on life or their positive view of themselves. Cue several 2s and 7s hitting the dislike button and closing this video. But hey, on the bright side, this positive outlook makes 2s and 7s great at bolstering the mood of anyone they come into contact with, as their love and levity can make them feel like this combination of Mother Teresa and Patch Adams. It is important to note, however, there is a subtle difference between how these types manifest their positive energy. 2s get a bigger boost from relational intimacy, while 7s get a bigger boost from relational experiences. Meaning the 2 would rather have a deep conversation with you at a local cafe, while the 7 would rather take you on an awesome skiing trip. Either way, both 2s and 7s feel like people are a very important way to elevate their enjoyment of life, especially if the 7 has a strong social instinct and or the 2 has a strong 3-wing. Although another important distinction between these two is in regard to their preferred relational dynamic. 2s love to feel needed or central to their relationships, while 7s prefer the freedom to kind of pop in and out of their relationships whenever it feels most exciting. Essentially, 2s want to be the fire that their loved ones gather around, while 7s want to be the gasoline that takes the fire to a whole nother level. Okay, speaking of having a little fire in them, both 2s and 7s can be surprisingly sharp with folks whenever they feel stressed. If we take a look at their movements of disintegration, you'll see that 7s disintegrate to the more angry and critical side of the Type 1 reformer, which just happens to be one of the wings of the Type 2 helper. Conversely, 2s disintegrate to the more confrontational and somewhat domineering side of the Type 8 challenger, which also happens to be one of the wings of the Type 7 enthusiast. So, as you can see, these types have a pantheon of shared personality traits that can make it really hard to tell them apart if you don't understand the intrinsic motivating factors hidden beneath them. And on that note, it's time to drill down a little deeper and talk about what specifically attracts the Type 2 helper to the Type 7 enthusiast and vice versa. Twos orient their lives around the needs of other people, which isn't always a fun experience. That is, until they link up with a Type 7 enthusiast. 7s have this magical way of getting you excited to meet their needs, so much so that it almost seems like it's what you wanted to do, right? This dynamic means that the 2 not only gets to live in their sweet spot of feeling helpful, supportive, or needed, but they also get to go on that self-indulgent summer vacay to Brazil, and then Copenhagen for Christmas, and then probably New Year's in London, and then, oh my gosh, what about Paris for Valentine's Day? Jokes aside, the 7's need to constantly adventure through life is usually more of a gift than a burden on the 2, as many 2s love to travel, love to try new things, and just love to be with the people they love. This is also one of the many reasons why 2s mistype as 7s all the time. Sadly though, a major difference between 2s and 7s is the 2's propensity to sacrifice that free-spirited part of their identity in order to serve a more debilitated, demanding, or just complacent person. This, again, is why the 7's relentlessly adventurous spirit can be a major point of attraction for the 2, especially given the fact that your average 2 needs to feel a sense of permission from their partner before they go after their true passions or bucket list experiences. Now, this deferential aspect of the 2's personality can also be explained in part by the Hornevian triad, which describes the general way each Enneagram type navigates relationships or social interactions. As you'll see here, 2s are compliant types, which means they prefer to comply with the needs of the group or an important person in their life as a way to attain the love and acceptance they crave. 7s, on the other hand, are in the assertive group, as they prefer to be in charge or have no one in charge. That way they'll have the freedom they crave to do whatever they want. This difference in their social preferences obviously has its pros and cons, but as far as being a point of attraction goes, the 7 models several key behaviors that are crucial for the 2's personal growth, which are how to know what you want, how to express what you want, and how to feel at peace going after what you want. Those are all things that your average 2 is horribly uncomfortable with, but once they start living into, they unlock a sense of self-worth and self-acceptance they would otherwise never experience. So at the end of the day, 2s are attracted to 7s not only because they have some really fun needs to meet, but because they help the 2 feel permission to meet their own needs. All right, those are just a few things that typically attract the Type 2 helper to the Type 7 enthusiast. Time now to switch gears and talk about what attracts the 7 to the 2. The 7's attraction to the Type 2 helper can really exist on one of 2 very different levels. The first level is all about what the 7 gets, and the second level is all about what the 7 gives. Now, on the first level, the 7 is attracted to the way the 2 lavishes them with attention, affirmation, and a kind of maternalistic concern for their well-being. Now, not to get too Freudian here, but the general childhood pattern for 7s is defined by this disconnection or frustration with the primary nurturing figure in their life, which, traditionally speaking, is the mother. That's not to say that 7s have bad relationships with their moms, and I'm definitely not saying that their moms did a bad job of raising them. But what typically happens is that there's some strain on the family that causes the nurturing figure's attention to go elsewhere. Like maybe they got real sick when the 7 was little, or had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet, or they had another child with special needs. Whatever it was, it caused the 7 to feel like they had to nurture themselves, which is why they're so fixated on meeting their own needs, finding their own ways to enjoy life, and ultimately looking at themselves the way a loving maternal figure would. This is why many adult 7s see themselves in such a positive light, as it's a way to compensate for any lack of loving attention they may have felt as children. Fortunately, there is no lack of love, affirmation, or support when they're around the Type 2 helper, as 2s fixate on the positive qualities of their loved ones and have no problem playing a more supportive role that allows the 7 to feel both free and cared for. All right, that's the first level of the 7's attraction to the 2, and I know it may not sound great, but there's nothing wrong with being attracted to someone who thinks you're the cat's pajamas. And honestly, we all need someone like that in our corner, so kudos to the 7 for embracing it. Okay, now for the second level of the 7's attraction to the 2, which is much deeper and much more, dare I say, transformational. You see, the core fear of the Type 7 ego is of being deprived. Again, this ties back to their childhood experience, where they felt like their needs were ignored or simply too much for their caregivers. So as adults, they overindulge and constantly consume more than they need. This in turn leads to a constant dissatisfaction with what they have, because once they have it, they still feel unfulfilled. So it must have been the wrong thing or not enough of the right thing. The only way this cycle of dissatisfying overconsumption ends is when the 7 realizes that giving to others is more fulfilling than taking for yourself. And that's why healthy 7s are so attracted to the heart of a Type 2 helper, as 2s naturally embody the kind of joy and gratitude that comes from living a generous life that's oriented around loving people well. All right, this couple may just want to hit the pause button and soak in all that positive stuff for a moment, because now it's time to talk about what conflict looks like between 2s and 7s. Hey there, friend. Looks like you're a little more than halfway through this Enneagram relationship episode, which means it's a great time to not only watch this fancy little neon graphic float off into the distance, but to hit those like and subscribe buttons, you know? You know what I mean? You know those buttons that are sitting right there? Don't be coy, you know where they are. You know, if you're feeling non-committal, you can just hit the like button. It's still really helpful. Okay, let's get back to it. Conflict between 2s and 7s is all about needs and expectations. The average 2 underemphasizes their needs, while the average 7 overemphasizes their needs. So the general pattern that plays out looks like the 2 sacrificing more and more of their needs for the 7, with the hope or expectation that they'll eventually return the favor. But the 7 often forgets to appreciate or even notice all that the 2 is doing for them, because they just kind of expect to get what they need. Now, in a romantic relationship, these expectations continue to clash, and they are, as the old saying goes, resentments waiting to happen. And painting with broad strokes, 2s generally expect that their life over time will become more stable, domestic, or relationally grounded. But 7s, on the other hand, expect that their life will become more exciting, spontaneous, or adventurous. Again, broad strokes, so this pattern can play out a ton of different ways. But generally speaking, the 2 can start to feel like the 7 is more interested in their exhilarating or childish activities than they are with planting roots together. And the 7 can start to feel like the 2's desire to plant roots is going to limit their ability to freely pursue what makes them happy. What makes this dynamic even more tricky is the fact that neither the 2 nor the 7 wants to talk about anything overtly negative, frustrating, or emotionally painful. Remember, they're both in the positive outlook group of the harmonic triad, so they'd much prefer to cope with painful relationship tension by ignoring it and moving on to something more enjoyable. 2s and 7s are also this dangerous cocktail of avoidant yet upbeat and engaging. So when you're around them, you'd have no idea that anything's wrong, as life just seems like it's going wonderfully and everything's fine, we're fine, this is fine, how about you? Oh, do you want to go to a concert tonight? We got free tickets. This rosy facade can make it real difficult for friends and family to support them in any meaningful way, because they often resist or even resent the implication that they're not doing well, even if their relationship is starting to look like that cartoon meme of a dog sipping coffee in a house on fire. Again, we're fine. This is fine. Now, the big red flag for this couple is when all that pent-up resentment finally gets pressurized enough to explode and everything finally comes spilling out. Typically, 2s have got a scorecard ready for just this very moment, with all the ways they've served the 7 without them ever returning the favor. However, the 7 is pretty immune to feeling guilty about what they've taken, because again, they expect to have their needs met, and they expect everyone else to go about meeting their own needs as well. Ironically, within both of their perspectives is this kind of self-assurance that they're a pretty great person. So if there's an issue in the relationship, it's probably not their fault. This stubborn resistance to admit fault, apologize, and then reconcile will either lead to some increasingly hostile interactions, especially if the 7 has an 8-wing, as that's also where the 2 goes during their movement of disintegration, or they'll just become more involved with external relationships away from each other, as the 6-wing pulls the 7 into exciting activities with other friends, and the 2 seeks out a person or people that can feed their core desire to feel both loved and needed. All right. That's enough about conflict, and since I don't like to end these episodes with a bleak picture of a relationship gone wrong, let's switch gears and talk about a few ways 2s and 7s can have a healthier future together. The first and most important tip I have for this couple is to practice slowing down and getting fully present with each other. And here's why. If we take a look at the triadic patterns for 2s and 7s, you'll see that 2s are in the heart center, while 7s are in the head center. This means that 2s are primarily influenced by their emotions, and 7s are primarily influenced by their thoughts. Now, if we drill down a layer deeper, you'll see that both 2s and 7s fall back on the physical activity of the gut or body center when they have an issue with their primary triad center. So for 2s, if they start to feel unwanted emotions like shame or sadness, they try and distract themselves by doing stuff with or for other people, which then makes them feel good about themselves. 7s do something very similar, but they choose to distract themselves from unwanted thoughts or anxiety by taking part in fun or exciting activities, which then makes them think their life is good again. If these patterns are left unchecked, the 2-7 couple will pack their schedules with so much avoidant activity that they inevitably lose touch with each other. This is why it's so important for this couple to regularly shut down their engines, say no to everyone or everything else, put that phone on Do Not Disturb, and just be with each other. If this couple can make it into a truly present state of quality time with each other on a consistent basis, then I feel like 90% of their problems, miscommunications, or sense of disconnection will naturally work itself out. That is, if they're willing to subvert their tendency to only talk about their positive thoughts and feelings, aka that old harmonic triad we've been talking about. Also, you 7s are probably going to have a harder time prioritizing your partner than the 2, so make sure your need for autonomy doesn't always trump the 2's need for intimacy. But with that said, it's also important for you 2s not to use guilt as a way to pressure the 7 to spend more time with you. Not only is it passive-aggressive, but it's also a waste of time because 7s are almost impossible to guilt into doing something they don't want to do. So just ask him for what you need when you need it. Okay, the last thing I'd say to this couple is to make sure that you have some kind of shared passion at the center of your relationship. And that doesn't include sex, as that can become the only thing that brings this couple together, especially when they're all young and virile. No, I'm talking about something that will be like a gravitational force in the relationship, bringing you back together when the inevitable stressors of life start pulling you apart. So if you're in the early stages of this relationship and everything is all bubbly and exciting, just be sure to have a reality check with yourselves to figure out if you have any shared goals, beliefs, or greater purpose for the relationship that can become your foundation for a lasting commitment. All right, that's plenty of advice for today, which means it's time to wrap things up as we always do with the patented YGAT relationship rating system. First up on the YGAT relationship rating system is the spice meter. And I'd say this couple is definitely in the medium spice range because their needs or neediness will spark plenty of heated moments. But since their default preference is to keep things nice and light, let's stick them just past the halfway point at about a 6 out of 10. Okay, next up is the power meter. And this can certainly be a strong couple with a mixture of the 7's high energy, big picture thinking and the 2's high tolerance for supporting the 7's big picture thinking. So yeah, let's put them at about a 7 out of 10. Although a 2-wing 3 with a 7-wing 8 could definitely bring the social ambition necessary to max out the power meter. But anyway, last up is the fun meter, and this couple is definitely tied with the 7-3 couple for most fun Enneagram pairing out there. Actually, I may give the 7-2 couple the lead just by a hair since they're both positive outlook types. So even though they're both going to be a 10 out of 10 on the fun meter, let's consider the 7-2 couple 1A and the 7-3 couple 1B. All right, folks, there you have it, the Enneagram 2-7 pairing. A seductively spicy, si se puede attitude-having bundle of fun that'll keep your spirits lifted no matter what may be weighing you down. That's a wrap on this Enneagram relationship episode for the Type 2 helper with a Type 7 enthusiast. If you're jumping off here, then I will say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please do me a tiny favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons for me on your way out, if you wouldn't mind. But hey, if you're sticking around for more Enneagram goodness, then I have got plenty of relationship-themed content for you to choose from right here on the screen, as well as some more lighthearted content if you need a break. Take your pick.